Manifesto of the Free Humans, Chapter 3, Vertical and Horizontal Agorism. As more people reject the state's mystifications, nationalism, pseudo-economics, false threats, and betrayed political promises, the counter-economy grows both vertically and horizontally. Horizontally, it involves more and more people who turn more and more of their activities towards the counter-economic. Vertically, it means new structures, businesses, and services grow specifically to serve the counter-economy, safe communication links, arbitrators, insurance for specifically illegal activities, early forms of protection technology, and even guards and protectors. Eventually, the underground breaks into the overground, where most people are agorists, few are statists, and the nearest state enforcement cannot effectively crush them. Samuel E. Konkin III, Applied Agorism, and Agorist Primer. We are going to take a look at two different types of counter-economic action, which are applicable to a variety of individuals in a range of living situations. We refer to these strategies as vertical and horizontal agorism. We are working with two complementary definitions of horizontal and vertical, which further explain the how of agorist philosophy. These definitions are taken from the above quote from Samuel Konkin III and from Swedish-Austrian economist Per Bylund and his 2006 essay, A Strategy for Forcing the State Back. Let's compare the definitions and see how they can provide a path for the eager agorist. Konkin starts by describing the counter-economy as growing horizontally in the sense of an ever-increasing amount of mainstream population turning their activities towards the non-statist economy. Vertical growth, in the Konkian sense, involves the actual creation of counter-institutions to the statist counterparts. This means building alternatives not only to the economic power centers via alternative currencies, but alternatives to the deadstream corporate media, the corporatized food production systems, the compliant academic centers, and the growing nonprofit industrial complex. Side note, the industry formerly known as the mainstream media is correctly referred to as the deadstream media because everything produced by this industry leads to misinformation, faulty decision-making, and eventually death. The corporate media is a constant stream of lies and decay. Per Bylund describes his vision of vertical agorism as the introvert strategy based on the work and ideas of radical libertarian Karl Hess. Hess was an extremely eloquent speaker and speechwriter who grew from conservative to libertarian anarchist to a more left-leaning community organizer and activist. During the 1960s, he was heavily involved in organizing on campus during the rise of the New Left and anti-war student movements. Hess worked with Murray Rothbard, Konkin, Carl Oglesby of the Students for Democratic Society, and several others, attempting alliances between the emerging New Left and libertarian movements. He was also one of the few people to have 100% of his wages stolen by the IRS for challenging the income tax. In the 1970s, Hess shifted his focus of activism to experiment in community building within the low-income neighborhood of Adams Morgan and Washington, D.C. In his books Community Technology and Neighborhood Power, Hess outlines how he worked with the local community to build an empowered community focused on sustainability, or what they termed appropriate technology. Hess describes a neighborhood with aquaponic gardening in basements, rooftop gardens, and community services meant to replace the state option. He was adamant that tools and technology directly contribute to freedom. By being able to share tools with your community members, you are able to share access to the means of production and encourage entrepreneurship. It is this focus on community empowerment that Per Bylund refers to as the vertical or introvert strategy. These actions can be considered agorist in the sense that they are aimed at building self and community reliance rather than dependence on external forces, but they are not explicitly counter-economic because they do not involve black and gray markets. Still, these vertical actions are extremely valuable and necessary. Vertical agorism would include participating in and creating community exchange networks, urban farming, backyard gardening, farmers markets, supporting alternatives to the police, and supporting peer-to-peer decentralized technologies. While these vertical steps could potentially involve the use of the state's currency, and therefore not completely counter-economic, they are still significant for challenging the dependency on the state and corporate classes. Other vertical steps may not involve directly exchanging currency, but still work against dependency. This could include moral support and promotion of technologies that disrupt the status quo and foster stronger relationships among community members. One very pronounced example of vertical agorism is seen in the growing alternative media, which has been made possible by the internet. Less than one generation ago, the mainstream media, owned by megacorporations and tightly regulated by government, controlled all of the information that filtered down to society. the distribution of information in society came from the top down, making it very easy to brainwash and propagandize the population. However, with the rise of the internet, activists and freedom-seeking individuals discovered that they could use this new medium to create their own media, become journalists themselves, and fight back against the propaganda of the state. In just a few short years, the alternative media quickly upset the monopoly of the mainstream media, taking up large portions of their once exclusive market share. The surge of independent media provides an excellent example in our study of how alternative systems and institutions can be created to compete with existing state monopolies. Our goal is to question and challenge the mechanisms of power that seek to influence and rule over our lives. This includes the state, as well as other institutions that attempt to exert control and influence. For example, by choosing to grow your own food or support local farmers, you are taking a vertical step away from the biotechnology corporations that promote the heavy use of pesticides and a potentially hazardous technology. You are also not supporting the transportation of food products from thousands of miles away. Instead, you walk to your backyard or the local market for your produce. This greatly increases your independence while relinquishing support for an unsustainable industry. These vertical steps are also the easiest way to begin living in line with your principles. Once again, we can see the value of consistency of words and actions. Per Byland describes the horizontal or extrovert strategy as more directly related to the ideas of Konkin. The extrovert label is related to the bold choice to pursue action that the state considers to be illegal or immoral. By venturing into this territory, you are joining the ranks of the bootlegger, the moonshiner, the cannabis dealer, the guerrilla gardener, the unlicensed lawnmower, food vendor or barber, the weapons dealer, and the crypto-anarchists. When one combines the vertical and horizontal agorist strategy, an image comes into view that illustrates the steps that can be taken by a wide range of people in a variety of living situations and environments. In the bottom left corner, we have statism, and in the top right corner, we have agorism. We can plot vertical actions which help lift the individual up from dependency. Perhaps your situation is better suited to vertical actions such as growing your own food, using encrypted messaging, hosting community skill shares at your house, practicing peaceful parenting tactics, providing alternatives to state welfare by crowdfunding money for community projects and feeding the homeless, or simply cleaning up the neighborhood. Each of these steps move the individual, and in the long term, the community, vertically towards consistency and independence. For those who are ready to become counter-economists and take on the risk of gray and black market activity, we plot their actions both vertically and horizontally. An agorist practicing horizontally and vertically would move up and away from statism and dependency to the top right position of agorism. This means for every garden built, alternative currency used, tax avoided, skill shared, business practiced without a license, and illegal substance sold, the individual can plot their progress from dependency to self-reliance and from statism to agorism. When Konkin first espoused the concept of agorism, the consciously practicing counter-economy may have only involved a few radical libertarians. But since that time, the opportunities for black and gray market exchanges have grown immensely. As the state's weaknesses become apparent, it will become safer for the masses to begin exiting the former economy and join the counter-economy. This is the truly freed market, or agora, which Konkin spoke of. Now that we have outlined the vertical and horizontal agorist strategy derived from the work of Karl Hess and Samuel Konkin, we must elaborate further on a concept that we hope will become widely adopted and adapted to many different communities. This is the aforementioned concept of freedom cells. Freedom cells are peer-to-peer groups made up of 7 to 9 people, with 8 being ideal, organizing themselves in a decentralized manner with the collective goal of asserting the sovereignty of group members through peaceful resistance and the creation of alternative institutions. Freedom cells could be seen as a very specific type of mutual aid group, where agorism and counter-economics play a key role. The name comes as a response to state propaganda around terror cells. We are consciously choosing to reclaim the language and build cells that spread freedom. Also, freedom cells act like cells in a body that are performing important tasks individually while also serving the goal of the larger organism. In our vision, every freedom cell is playing a vital role of spreading counter-economic activity and agorist philosophy while also forming a part of the larger network that will foster exchange of ideas and products between cells. The number of 8 participants is drawn from the research of Bob Podolsky and his book Flourish, An Alternative to Government and Other Hierarchies. Podolsky is the protege of researcher John David Garcia, who spent 20 years researching how to maximize the creativity of a group of people working together on a joint project. After performing hundreds of experiments, he came up with an optimized model based on groups of 8 that he called an octet or octalog. The idea being that a shortage of individuals would leave the group limited in capability, but with too many people, the group is bogged down with disorganization and lack of focus. Podolsky recommends forming octologues made up of 4 men and 4 women, guided by specific ethical tenets. Although freedom cells are also promoted as groups of 8 individuals collaborating together, they differ from octologues in that they are heavily focused on decentralization. So while Bob Podolsky has outlined a detailed vision of how an octologue should operate, we hope to provide examples of applications for freedom cells without telling other freedom cells how to operate. The needs of each community will naturally differ. Beyond a general agreement to respect each other's right to be free of coercion, we believe the freedom cells should not be monopolized by the vision of a single cell. We caution the reader to remember that our ideas are a guide, but not the final word on the literally limitless possibilities. In the beginning, individuals can work together to accomplish goals such as every group member having 3 months' worth of storable foods, encrypted communication, a bug-out plan, and ensuring participants have access to firearms or some form of self-defense, and know how to use them safely and proficiently. All the while, cell members make themselves readily available to render mutual aid to their cell in whatever form that may come. Once you have established 7 to 9 people within a freedom cell, each individual should be encouraged to then go on their own and start another freedom cell, especially if the original members are not living in close proximity to one another. Living reasonably close to each other will allow for a quick response in emergency situations. Once again, every member of the freedom cells should be encouraged to start additional cells. Eventually, the original would be connected to 7 or 9 additional cells through each individual member for a total of 70 to 90 people. Imagine the strength and influence these cells could exert once they are connected in the digital world via freedomcells.org and in the physical world where possible. The creation of the Freedom Cell Network could also serve as a social network for traveling agorists looking to do business in the counter-economy with other like minds. Through building and supporting alternatives such as local food networks, health services, mutual defense groups, and peer-to-peer economies and communication networks, freedom cells will be better able to disconnect and decouple themselves from state institutions they deem unworthy of their support. Once groups become large enough in numbers, it becomes quite possible for participants to opt out en masse and secure their liberty. This is the model we have been following in Houston with the Houston Freethinkers activist community and the Freethinker House community space. We began by building gardens and selling the crops via Nextdoor. We are also selling juice and kombucha tea using fruits harvested from trees of neighbors who understand our goals. We started with a small group of about 3 to 4 people meeting and discussing the goals and themes of our cells. The goal is to have skills and knowledge diffused throughout the group. This way, if one person leaves the group, that knowledge is not taken from the cell. For example, knowing that every cell member can perform CPR, use encrypted communications, shoot a gun, or communicate the Agorist message may be important for your cell. Obviously, certain individuals will be more skilled or knowledgeable in some areas, but there are foundational skills and information that should be common among all cell members. Our group has also used the structure to educate each other on specific topics of interest. Perhaps your freedom cell meets and agrees to learn everything available on permaculture or a particular philosophical concept. You divide the topic up among your cell and return 2 weeks later to educate each other. Or maybe your cell joins the Cell 411 app and responds to emergency alerts in your community. Several cells could join together to cop watch or actively resist and disarm violent police or other agents of the state. A freedom cell could connect with other cells for a covertly organized guerrilla gardening action. With the constant barrage of fake news coming from the establishment media, a freedom cell could quickly research and debunk incoming propaganda. Freedom cells can organize alternative exchange networks that encourage local artisans and entrepreneurs to come sell their unregulated crafts and accept alternative currencies. In a shit hits the fan scenario, freedom cells could have prearranged bug-out locations stocked with supplies. If several freedom cells were equally prepared, you now find yourself with a small community of empowered individuals as opposed to being forced to defend yourself alone. These are the pockets of agorism that Konkin predicted would come as the counter-economy outcompeted the status economy. While Konkin outlined his theory of getting from statism to agorism, he did not explore in detail the answer to how this would happen. We believe freedom cells are at least part of the equation. Konkin was correct in his prediction that the state would not hesitate to smash down any agorist who dared venture into the counter-economy too quickly or too boldly. This can plainly be seen in the punishment of Ross Ulbricht, the accused criminal mastermind of the Silk Road online marketplace. Ulbricht helped people from all around the world do black market business without paying a single dime to the government of their respective homeland. Ulbricht and his apparent admin alter ego, Dread Pirate Roberts, Both expressed an affinity for the philosophy of Agorism. When he was sentenced to 3 life terms in January 2015, the judge called his opposition to government and economic restriction dangerous and declared that she must make sure no one dare to take up his flag. The state was quite literally terrified that the Silk Road allowed individuals to do business without their involvement. For all their alleged concern about the safety of drugs purchased on the Silk Road, the state truly opposed Ulbricht because it was a real-world practice in counter-economics designed to take power away from the state. In fact, drugs purchased on the Silk Road were far safer than those found on the streets due to the reputation-based rating system and a review system that was built into the site. Additionally, the online market removed the possibility of violence during the transaction, a danger that is all too real when buying drugs on the street. Remember, we cannot defeat the Federal Reserve or other central bank by using their currency. This will only empower them. We must create and support alternatives to the state's monopolies whenever possible. It will take brave agorists venturing into uncharted territories, making mistakes, occasionally falling victim to the state's law, and learning how to better our approach. We need these pioneers to lay the groundwork so that others in the future will not have to face the same difficulties. As these trailblazers light the way, we also expect to see a growth of free communities and freedom networks around the world. We have a vision of thousands of interlocking autonomous communities comprised of empowered individuals with a variety of unique ideas and expressions of the human experience. Communities voluntarily trading and sharing skills without violence inherent in our current paradigm. We believe this panarchistic, polycentric world can be achieved with an organized effort to spread agorist philosophy and increase participation in the counter-economy via freedom cells and vertical and horizontal agorism. We would like to offer these 10 tips for building freedom cells as a starting point for launching your group. Please adapt these to the specific needs of your community. Number 1. Identify potential candidates. Are they mentally, physically, spiritually sound for your goals? Number 2. Discuss common themes. What are the driving forces bringing the group together? Number 3. Identify strengths and weaknesses. Take an honest look at the strengths and weaknesses of each individual as well as the group as a whole. Number 4. Evaluate desired level of freedom versus security. Every individual may have a different desired level of freedom and as such will have different aims and acceptability of risks. Number 5. Set short-term and long-term goals. What can your cell accomplish in 3 months? How about a year? Number 6. Mindfulness training. Incorporate practices like nonviolent communication training and group meditation into your cell. Number 7. Accomplish goals. Document each goal successfully met by the cell or individual members. Number 8. Ongoing group education communication. Continuously expand your cell's knowledge, skills, and supplies. Number 9. Promote market goals and accomplishments. Use the power of social media, when safe, and marketing to let the world know how much more prosperous you are in the counter-economy. And number 10. Identify strategies for creating income and independence. Leverage the power and number of your cell to create counter-economic income that can't be taxed by the state.